ESG Disclosures and Reporting. A Practical Guide. Part 1. Introduction to ESG. What is ESG? ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, a set of criteria used to assess a company's operations and long-term sustainability. These three pillars extend beyond traditional financial metrics, helping stakeholders understand how a company manages risks and opportunities related to environmental and social issues, as well as corporate governance practices. The three pillars. Environmental factors consider how a company affects and manages the natural environment, including carbon emissions, energy efficiency, pollution, water usage, and biodiversity. Social factors evaluate how a company manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and communities. This includes diversity and inclusion, employee welfare, human rights, health and safety, and community impact. Governance factors examine the quality of a company's leadership, internal controls, shareholder rights, ethics, executive compensation, and board independence. Together, ESG considerations help paint a broader picture of a company's resilience, ethical conduct, and long-term strategic thinking. Why ESG matters. The relevance of ESG has grown significantly in recent years, driven by several intersecting global trends. Investor demand. Asset managers and institutional investors are increasingly integrating ESG into investment decisions. ESG funds have seen record inflows, indicating a shift in how the market evaluates risk and value. Regulatory pressure. Governments and regulatory bodies worldwide are introducing rules requiring ESG disclosures, such as the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, and proposed SEC guidelines in the U.S. Stakeholder expectations. Customers, employees, and the general public are demanding greater transparency and accountability. ESG performance often influences brand loyalty, talent attraction, and corporate reputation. Risk management. ESG factors are directly linked to risk, such as climate change, supply chain disruptions, and regulatory fines. Ignoring ESG can lead to long-term liabilities and reputational damage. Opportunities. Companies leading in ESG often identify new markets, innovation pathways, and operational efficiencies. Strong ESG performance is increasingly associated with improved financial outcomes. ESG versus CSR, corporate social responsibility. Many people conflate ESG with corporate social responsibility, CSR, but there are important distinctions. In essence, CSR is about doing good, while ESG is about demonstrating how doing good aligns with sustainable business performance. The evolution of ESG thinking. The ESG concept has evolved from being a niche concern to a mainstream consideration in business strategy and capital allocation. What began as a way to incorporate ethical concerns into investing has transformed into a data-driven approach to evaluating long-term corporate viability. As ESG has matured, it has shifted from values-based investing to value-based decision-making. Today, it's not just about what a company stands for, but how it performs in areas that affect both stakeholders and shareholders. In summary, ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, a framework to assess corporate sustainability. ESG matters for risk management, regulatory compliance, stakeholder engagement, and value creation. It differs from CSR by being data-driven, investment-oriented, and increasingly regulated. Part 2. History and evolution of ESG reporting. Early roots of ESG thinking. The foundations of ESG reporting lie in the broader concepts of socially responsible investing, SRI, and corporate social responsibility, CSR. These ideas began taking shape in the mid-20th century, largely driven by religious groups, labor unions, and socially conscious investors. In the 1960s and 70s, investors began screening out companies involved in controversial industries, such as tobacco, weapons, and apartheid-era South Africa. While these exclusions were often moral in nature, they laid the groundwork for integrating non-financial factors into investment decisions. The shift toward ESG integration. The term ESG was formally coined in 2004 in a landmark report titled "Who Cares Wins?", initiated by the United Nations Global Compact in collaboration with major financial institutions. The report made the case that incorporating environmental, social, and governance factors into capital markets makes good business sense and leads to more sustainable markets. That same year, another influential paper, The Global Compact and the Financial Sector, emphasized that ESG integration could improve long-term risk-adjusted returns. These ideas signaled a move from ethical investing to strategic risk management. The role of international organizations. Several global initiatives helped institutionalize ESG principles in the following years. 2006 UN Principles for Responsible Investment, PRI, launched with support from 63 investment companies representing over $6 trillion in assets. PRI encouraged investors to incorporate ESG factors into decision-making. 2010's rise of ESG frameworks, standards such as the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, SASB, and the CDP, formerly Carbon Disclosure Project, provided more structure and comparability for ESG reporting. 2015 Paris Agreement and SDGs. The adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and the Paris Climate Accord placed ESG-related issues at the center of global economic planning and regulation. ESG goes mainstream. By the late 2010s, ESG reporting had moved from the periphery to the core of corporate strategy. Three major developments accelerated this shift. Investor pressure. Asset managers like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street began demanding ESG disclosures, citing long-term fiduciary responsibility. Data availability. Technology and big data analytics enabled better tracking of ESG performance and its correlation with financial outcomes. Climate-related risks. Events like the Australian wildfires, rising sea levels, and extreme weather made the physical risks of climate change tangible, driving the need for more transparent disclosures. By 2020, ESG assets under management had surpassed $35 trillion globally, according to the Global Sustainable Investment Alliance. Regulatory milestones in ESG reporting. As ESG reporting matured, regulators began stepping in to make disclosures mandatory or standardized. European Union. 2018 Non-Financial Reporting Directive, NFRD. 2023 Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, requiring detailed audited ESG reports from thousands of EU companies. United States. The SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, has proposed rules mandating climate-related disclosures and is expanding its ESG enforcement unit. Asia Pacific. Countries like Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong have introduced mandatory ESG reporting for listed companies, aligning with global frameworks like TCFD. From voluntary to mandatory. Historically, ESG reporting was voluntary and narrative-driven. Companies chose what to disclose, how to present it, and whether to get third-party assurance. Today, there's a clear trend toward standardization, using frameworks like ISSB or GRI. Digitization, XBRL tagging, AI-driven audits. Verification, external assurance and audit readiness, and mandatory compliance, particularly for listed or large public interest entities. Key inflection points. In summary, ESG reporting has evolved from ethical investing roots to a globally recognized business imperative. Key events and institutions like the UN, PRI, and TCFD shape the modern ESG landscape. The focus has shifted from voluntary, narrative-based disclosures to standardized, investor-relevant reporting, backed increasingly by regulation. Part 3. ESG Standards and Frameworks. Why ESG frameworks matter. As ESG reporting has grown in importance, so too has the need for standardized frameworks that ensure consistency, comparability, and credibility in disclosures. ESG frameworks provide structured guidance on what to report, how to report it, and why it matters, giving both internal and external stakeholders the information they need to assess sustainability performance. Without such frameworks, ESG reporting risks becoming fragmented, inconsistent, or even misleading. Overview of major ESG frameworks. There are several prominent frameworks and standards, each with different purposes, audiences, and scopes. Below is an overview of the most widely used ESG disclosure tools globally. 1. Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. Purpose: to provide a comprehensive set of sustainability disclosure standards. Audience: broad stakeholders including investors, governments, NGOs, and civil society. Focus: impact on the economy, environment, and society. Scope: holistic, covering all ESG topics. Strengths: most widely adopted framework globally, especially for corporate responsibility reports. Key characteristics: modular structure, universal sector and topic standards. Emphasis on stakeholder engagement and materiality. Strong alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. 2. Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB. Purpose: to guide the disclosure of financially material ESG issues. Audience: investors and capital markets. Focus: ESG issues that are likely to affect financial performance. Scope: sector-specific standards, 77 industries. Strengths: clear, concise metrics that link ESG to enterprise value. Key characteristics: industry-specific metrics. Focus on US GAAP and IFRS alignment. Often used in conjunction with other standards, e.g. GRI. 3. Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. Purpose: to improve and increase climate-related financial disclosures. Audience: investors, lenders, insurers, and regulators. Focus: climate risks and opportunities. Scope: sector-agnostic, climate-specific. Strengths: strong regulatory momentum and alignment with global standards. 4 key pillars: governance, strategy, risk management, metrics and targets. TCFD has become a foundation for climate disclosure regulations, including those in the UK, EU, Japan, and proposed SEC rules in the US. 4. Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP. Purpose: to help companies disclose environmental impacts. Audience: investors and environmental stakeholders. Focus: climate change, water security, and deforestation. Scope: environmental disclosure only. Strengths: widely used climate scoring system. Key features: questionnaire-based reporting. Scoring and benchmarking. Aligns with TCFD and science-based targets. 5. International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC. Purpose: to promote integrated thinking and reporting. Audience: long-term investors and corporate boards. Focus: how sustainability and strategy create value over time. Scope: high-level, principle-based. Strengths: useful for combining ESG and financial performance in one report. In 2021, the IIRC merged with SASB to form the Value Reporting Foundation, VRF, which was later consolidated under the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB. The emergence of ISSB and IFRS sustainability standards. In 2021, the International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS Foundation, established the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, to create a global baseline for ESG disclosures. This move aims to consolidate and standardize sustainability reporting across markets. ISSB goals: simplify ESG reporting landscape, develop globally accepted standards, ensure financial relevance of ESG data, In 2023, the ISSB released its first two standards. IFRS S1, General Sustainability-Related Disclosures. IFRS S2, Climate-Related Disclosures, aligned with TCFD. These standards are already being endorsed by regulators in jurisdictions like the UK, Canada, and Singapore. Choosing the right framework. Companies often use multiple frameworks in combination, depending on their audience and reporting goals. Here's a simplified decision matrix. Harmonization trends. There is growing convergence across standards. GRI and ISSB are working toward interoperability. TCFD is being incorporated into IFRS S2. SASB metrics are embedded in ISSB disclosures. This convergence is expected to reduce confusion and reporting fatigue, while improving comparability and auditability. In summary, ESG frameworks provide structured guidance for sustainability reporting. GRI, SASB, TCFD, and CDP are among the most widely adopted. The ISSB is emerging as a global baseline for ESG disclosure, promoting consistency and alignment. Companies must tailor their framework selection to their industry, stakeholder expectations, and regulatory environment. Part 4. Environmental Disclosures. Understanding environmental disclosures. Environmental disclosures focus on how an organization interacts with the natural world and manages the risks and opportunities arising from environmental factors. These disclosures are central to ESG reporting because they reveal how companies contribute to or mitigate pressing global issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and natural resource depletion. Investors, regulators, and stakeholders increasingly expect transparent, data-backed environmental information. Companies that effectively manage their environmental impact can reduce regulatory risks, cut operational costs, and strengthen their reputations. Core environmental disclosure areas. While reporting frameworks vary, most environmental disclosures fall under a few core topics. 1. Climate change and greenhouse gas (GHG) emissions. Climate change is the most material environmental issue for many industries. Disclosures often cover GHG emissions. Scope 1. Direct emissions from owned or controlled sources, e.g. company vehicles, boilers. Scope 2. Indirect emissions from purchased electricity, steam, heating, and cooling. Scope 3. All other indirect emissions in the value chain, e.g. business travel, supply chain, product use. Carbon intensity metrics. Emissions per unit of revenue, product, or employee. Climate targets, net zero goals, science-based targets, emissions reduction commitments. Transition and physical risks. Risks associated with climate policy, carbon pricing, extreme weather, and resource availability, often aligned with TCFD. 2. Energy use and efficiency. Reporting energy consumption is critical for identifying environmental impact and efficiency opportunities. Key metrics include total energy use by source, fossil fuels, renewables, etc. Energy intensity, e.g. per unit of production. Renewable energy share. Energy reduction initiatives and performance. 3. Water management. Water is a critical resource in many industries, e.g. agriculture, manufacturing, energy. Disclosures often include total water withdrawal and discharge. Water consumption by source, surface, ground, municipal. Water-stressed region usage. Water efficiency improvements. Wastewater treatment and recycling. 4. Waste and pollution. Waste generation and pollution affect regulatory risk, operational efficiency, and community relations. Common disclosures. Total waste, generated and recycled. Hazardous versus non-hazardous waste. Air emissions, NOx, SOx, particulate matter. Waste disposal methods, e.g. landfill, incineration, composting. Circular economy initiatives. 5. Biodiversity and land use. Though less universally reported, biodiversity and land use disclosures are becoming more important, especially in industries like mining, forestry, and agriculture. Key elements. Operations in protected or high biodiversity areas. Habitat restoration or offset programs. Deforestation policies and practices. Nature-related risks and dependencies. TNFD emerging as biodiversity equivalent to TCFD. Tools and frameworks for environmental reporting. Companies often use these frameworks for environmental disclosures. GRI provides detailed topic standards, e.g., GRI 302 for energy, GRI 305 for emissions. CDP focuses on climate, water, and forest disclosures with scoring systems. TCFD for disclosing climate-related financial risks and opportunities. ISSB IFRS S2, climate-specific disclosures aligned with TCFD. Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, validates emissions reduction targets. GHG Protocol, methodology standard for measuring and reporting GHG emissions. Industry-specific environmental materiality. Environmental priorities vary by industry. For example, companies must conduct materiality assessments to determine which environmental issues are most relevant to their operations and stakeholders. Case example, Apple Inc. Apple reports extensively on environmental issues, including 100% renewable energy for corporate facilities. Product lifecycle carbon footprint. Supplier emissions reporting. Circular design, use of recycled materials. Alignment with TCFD and SBTI commitments. This level of disclosure supports Apple's sustainability brand while providing transparency for investors. Challenges in environmental reporting. Scope 3 complexity. Gathering accurate data from across the value chain is difficult. Inconsistent metrics, variations across frameworks and countries create comparability issues. Greenwashing risks. Overstating environmental efforts can backfire under regulatory or public scrutiny. Assurance gaps. Many environmental disclosures are still unaudited. In summary, environmental disclosures are essential for managing sustainability risk and aligning with investor and regulatory expectations. Key areas include climate impact, energy use, water management, waste, and biodiversity. Frameworks like GRI, TCFD, CDP, and ISSB help structure disclosures, but challenges remain in data quality and standardization. Part 5. Social disclosures. The importance of social disclosures. While environmental and governance disclosures often receive the most attention, social factors are equally critical to understanding a company's long-term performance and sustainability. Social disclosures highlight how a company interacts with its employees, customers, suppliers, communities, and society at large. Social issues, from labor practices and human rights to diversity and health, can directly affect brand value, legal risk, operational continuity, and investor confidence. Core areas of social disclosure. Social disclosures can be broad and varied, but most frameworks and stakeholders expect reporting in the following key areas. 1. Labor practices and employee well-being. This includes how companies treat their workforce and create safe, fair, and inclusive working environments. Key metrics. Total workforce size and composition, by gender, age, contract type. Employee turnover rates. Average wages and wage equity. Workplace injury and illness rates. Occupational health and safety management systems. Training and development hours per employee. Disclosure example, GRI 403, report lost time injury frequency rate, LTIFR. Policies for preventing unsafe conditions, and occupational health training programs. 2. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Companies are increasingly expected to foster diverse and inclusive cultures at every level. Key metrics: gender and ethnic diversity, workforce and leadership. Pay equity across demographic groups. DEI goals, policies, and training programs. Representation data and progress reporting. Many firms align with initiatives such as UN Women's Empowerment Principles, 30% Club, Gender Diversity on Boards, Equal Pay Certifications. 3. Human rights and supply chain ethics. Global companies must ensure respect for human rights across their operations and supply chains. Key disclosures. Policies aligned with the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. Due diligence procedures to identify and mitigate risks, e.g., child labor, forced labor. Supplier audits and performance data. Conflict minerals disclosure, in line with Dodd-Frank or OECD standards. Modern slavery statements, required in some jurisdictions. Framework alignment, GRI 408 child labor, GRI 409 forced or compulsory labor. 4. Customer relations and product responsibility. Customers are stakeholders too, especially in sectors where trust, health, or safety are critical. Topics may include product quality and safety metrics, customer satisfaction scores, data privacy and cybersecurity policies, product accessibility and affordability, ethical marketing practices. Example: tech companies often report on data breaches, customer complaint resolution times, and compliance with privacy regulations like GDPR or CCPA. 5. Community engagement and social impact. Companies impact communities both positively and negatively. Responsible businesses aim to generate social value while minimizing harm. Key disclosures. Community investment, financial or volunteer hours. Local hiring and sourcing strategies. Impact assessments for major projects, especially in extractive industries. Grievance mechanisms for community concerns. Frameworks and standards for social disclosures. Social reporting can be complex because it's less standardized than environmental or governance reporting. Still, several frameworks provide useful guidance. GRI, extensive social disclosure standards, e.g. GRI 401 to 419. SASB, industry-specific metrics on workforce, human rights, and community impact. UN Global Compact, 10 principles related to labor, human rights, and anti-corruption. ISO 26000, guidance on social responsibility. SDGs, many social goals, e.g. 5 Sudanese pounds, gender equality 8 Sudanese pounds, decent work. Materiality of social topics, by industry. Just as with environmental issues, the importance of social topics varies by sector. Social disclosure in action, Patagonia. Patagonia's social reporting includes detailed labor rights policies, fair trade certified supply chain partners, transparency about factory locations, robust community engagement, advocacy for worker-led climate justice. Its commitment to social responsibility strengthens its brand and supports long-term customer loyalty. Challenges in social reporting. Data availability, especially for supply chains or contractors. Cultural and legal differences. DEI and labor rights expectations vary across regions. Qualitative nature. Many social factors are harder to quantify than emissions or energy. Risk of greenwashing or social washing. Companies may overstate achievements without adequate evidence. In summary, social disclosures focus on people, employees, suppliers, customers, and communities. Key areas include labor practices, DEI, human rights, product responsibility, and community engagement. Leading frameworks include GRI, SASB, UNGC, and ISO 26000. Transparent social reporting is essential for building trust, mitigating reputational risk, and meeting stakeholder expectations. Part 6. Governance Disclosures. The role of governance in ESG. Corporate governance is the system of rules, practices, and processes by which a company is directed and controlled. It forms the foundation for ethical behavior, effective decision-making, and accountability to stakeholders. In ESG reporting, governance disclosures are essential because they demonstrate whether an organization has the leadership structures, policies, and controls in place to manage environmental and social risks, and to ensure transparency, integrity, and compliance. Core governance disclosure areas. Governance disclosures typically fall into several key categories, many of which are already familiar to publicly traded companies through traditional financial and risk reporting. 1. Board composition and structure. Stakeholders increasingly scrutinize the composition and effectiveness of a company's board. Key disclosure topics: board diversity, gender, age, ethnicity, skills, independence of board members, tenure and succession planning, committee structure, e.g., audit, risk, ESG, sustainability. ESG oversight roles, which board committees or directors oversee ESG. Best practice: disclose the percentage of board members who are independent and have ESG expertise. 2. Executive compensation and incentives. Executive pay is under growing pressure to align with long-term value creation, including ESG performance. Disclosure examples: pay ratio, CEO versus median employee. Performance-linked bonuses, e.g., tied to emissions reductions, DE progress. Equity ownership requirements. Clawback policies for misconduct. Trend: integration of ESG metrics into executive compensation plans, especially among large public companies. 3. Risk management and internal controls. Robust governance requires mechanisms to identify, assess, and mitigate key risks, including ESG risks. Key topics: ESG-related risk identification and integration into enterprise risk management, ERM. Climate risk oversight, often aligned with TCFD. Internal audit and compliance systems. Cybersecurity governance and data protection protocols. 4. Ethics, compliance, and anti-corruption. A company's ethical culture and legal compliance systems are fundamental to governance, transparency, and trust. Disclosure areas: Code of Ethics or Conduct, Anti-bribery and Corruption, ABC policies, Whistleblower protection and reporting mechanisms, Political contributions and lobbying activity, Third-party due diligence processes, Regulatory reference, alignment with laws like the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, UK Bribery Act, and OECD anti-corruption guidelines. 5. Shareholder rights and transparency. Strong governance ensures that shareholders have fair and equal access to information and influence. Key disclosures: voting rights and shareholder engagement practices. Communication of material ESG risks in annual filings. Disclosure of beneficial ownership. Say-on-pay policies and proxy access. 6. Tax transparency and fairness. Increasingly, investors want to understand how companies approach tax strategy from an ethical and sustainability perspective. Emerging practices. Country-by-country tax reporting. Disclosure of effective tax rates. Governance over tax risk management. ESG governance frameworks and standards. Governance disclosures are supported by both traditional corporate governance codes and ESG-specific standards. GRI 2 and GRI 205, Governance Structure and Anti-Corruption Practices. SASB, Industry-Specific Governance Indicators, e.g., Ethics, Business Model Resilience. TCFD, governance as one of 4 pillars for climate-related disclosure. OECD Principles of Corporate Governance. World Economic Forum Stakeholder Capitalism Metrics. ESG Governance in Practice. Unilever. Unilever offers a strong example of integrated ESG governance. Dedicated Sustainability Advisory Council, reporting to the board. ESG targets linked to executive bonuses. Transparent reporting on lobbying and tax practices. Annual ESG materiality and risk assessment embedded into strategy. Unilever's governance structure reinforces its environmental and social commitments, enhancing its credibility with investors and customers alike. Common governance reporting challenges. Inconsistent terminology. ESG oversight roles and risk disclosures vary widely in naming and framing. Opaque compensation structures. ESG links in pay plans are often vague or poorly defined. Superficial ethics disclosures. Codes of conduct may exist, but not be effectively enforced or monitored. Board expertise gaps. Many boards still lack members with ESG or climate literacy. Governance disclosure trends. In summary, governance disclosures are vital to demonstrate ethical leadership, accountability, and long-term value orientation. Key topics include board oversight, compensation, risk management, ethics, and shareholder rights. Strong ESG governance supports better decision-making, stakeholder trust, and regulatory compliance. Part 7. ESG Ratings and Indices. What are ESG ratings? ESG ratings are independent assessments that evaluate a company's environmental, social, and governance performance. These scores are typically issued by third-party providers and are intended to help investors, regulators, and stakeholders understand a company's sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Much like a credit rating assesses financial risk, ESG ratings aim to provide a snapshot of non-financial risk exposure, ESG performance, and how well those issues are being managed. Why ESG ratings matter? Investor decision-making. ESG ratings influence institutional investors and asset managers who integrate ESG into their investment strategies. Reputation management. Strong ratings can enhance public trust and media coverage. Benchmarking and strategy. Companies use ratings to identify performance gaps and peer comparisons. Access to capital. Lenders and insurers increasingly consider ESG ratings in underwriting decisions. ESG funds and indices. Inclusion in ESG indices can lead to increased demand for a company's stock. Major ESG rating agencies. Each ESG rating agency uses different methodologies, metrics, and data sources, which can lead to significantly different scores for the same company. 1. MSCI ESG ratings. Scale: AAA leader to CCC laggard. Focus: risk exposure and management. Coverage: greater than 8,500 companies globally. Methodology: sector-specific weighted indicators, controversy assessments. 2. Sustainalytics by Morningstar. Rating type: ESG risk rating, 0 to 100 scale, lower is better. Focus: material ESG risks not managed adequately. Output: negligible to severe risk categories. 3. S&P Global ESG scores. Based on Corporate Sustainability Assessment, CSA. Used for inclusion in Dow Jones Sustainability Index, DJSI. Combines public and private company data. 4. ISS ESG. Offers corporate rating, A+ to D-. Includes governance assessments, norms-based screening, and impact metrics. 5. Moody's ESG Solutions, VE. Acquired Vigeo Eiris. Offers ESG assessments, climate scenario analysis, and controversy monitoring. Key differences among ESG ratings. ESG indices. ESG indices are stock market indexes that track the performance of companies meeting certain ESG criteria. These indices are used to construct ESG funds and benchmarks. Notable ESG indices: Dow Jones Sustainability Index, DJSI, FTSE 4Good Index Series, MSCI ESG Leaders Indexes, S&P 500 ESG Index, Bloomberg Gender Equality Index. Inclusion in such indices can lead to higher visibility, more institutional ownership, and enhanced reputation. Challenges with ESG ratings. Despite their growing influence, ESG ratings face several criticisms and limitations. Inconsistency across agencies. Same company, different scores. This creates confusion for both investors and companies. Opaque methodologies. Many agencies don't fully disclose their weighting and scoring models. Over-reliance on self-reported data. Companies with better reporting may get higher scores regardless of actual performance. Lagging indicators. Ratings often reflect past performance rather than real-time risks or improvements. Greenwashing risk. Companies can optimize disclosures for higher ratings without genuine progress. How companies can improve ESG ratings. Materiality assessment. Focus on the ESG factors most relevant to the company's industry and stakeholders. Consistent disclosure. Report to multiple frameworks, e.g. GRI, SASB, TCFD, to ensure complete and comparable data. Engage with rating agencies. Review and correct factual errors, and participate in surveys when available. Address controversies. Be proactive in managing reputational risks through robust governance and crisis response. Benchmarking. Compare ratings with industry peers to identify gaps. Regulatory developments. There is a growing push for standardization and oversight of ESG ratings. European Union (EU) proposed regulation for ESG rating providers to improve transparency and prevent conflicts of interest. International Organization of Securities Commissions (IOSCO) issued guidance to improve reliability and comparability of ESG ratings. U.S. SEC, considering greater oversight and disclosure expectations for ESG rating firms, and the use of ESG in investment products. In summary, ESG ratings help investors assess non-financial risks, but are currently fragmented and inconsistent. Leading providers include MSCI, Sustainalytics, S&P Global, ISS, and Moody's ESG. ESG indices promote visibility and attract ESG-aligned capital. Companies should proactively manage disclosures, engage with raters, and continuously benchmark their ESG performance. Part 8. ESG Reporting Regulations Around the World. Introduction. As ESG issues gain traction in the global business environment, regulatory bodies are transitioning ESG disclosure from a voluntary practice to a mandatory requirement. Jurisdictions around the world are enacting or tightening regulations that compel companies to report on sustainability-related risks, impacts, and strategies. These regulations are not only driving transparency and accountability, but also shaping how ESG is integrated into financial reporting, risk management, and strategic planning. Why ESG regulation matters. Standardization creates consistency in ESG disclosures across companies and sectors. Investor confidence helps investors assess ESG performance with more reliable and comparable data. Greenwashing deterrence mandates evidence-based reporting to prevent misleading ESG claims. Global alignment facilitates harmonization across borders, aiding multinational operations. Global overview, ESG regulatory landscape. Here's a snapshot of the most significant ESG reporting regulations and initiatives worldwide. European Union, a global leader in ESG regulation. A. Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. Effective 2024 onward, phased implementation. Who's affected? Minus 50,000 companies in the EU and globally, including non-EU companies with large EU operations. Requires double materiality assessment, impact and financial materiality. Reporting per European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS. Assurance of ESG data. B. EU Taxonomy Regulation. Purpose: classifies economic activities that are environmentally sustainable. Requires disclosure of taxonomy alignment, percent of revenue CapEx OpEx. C. SFDR, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. Targets: asset managers and financial institutions. Focus: sustainability risks and adverse impact indicators. 2. United States, catching up quickly. A. SEC Climate Disclosure Rule proposed. Expected implementation, 2025. Applies to public companies. Requires disclosure of climate-related risks. Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHG emissions, Scope 3 in some cases. TCFD-aligned risk governance. B. California Climate Laws, SB 253 and SB 261. Effective, starting 2026. Applies to companies doing business in California with revenues greater than $500 million, SB 261, or greater than $1 billion, SB 253. Requires Scope 1 to 3 emissions disclosure, SB 253. Climate-related financial risk disclosures, SB 261. 3. United Kingdom. A. TCFD, aligned disclosure. Mandatory for large listed and private companies. Focus: governance strategy, risk management metrics and targets for climate risk. B. Sustainability disclosure requirements, SDR, upcoming. Will integrate climate, social, and green taxonomy elements. 4. Canada. CSA Climate Disclosure Proposal 2021, based on TCFD, not yet finalized. OSFI guidelines for financial institutions require climate risk governance and scenario analysis. 5. Australia. Australian Accounting Standards Board, AASB, planning new climate disclosure standards aligned with IFRS S2. Mandatory climate-related disclosures coming for large companies and financial institutions from 2025. 6. Asia Pacific. A. Japan. TCFD, aligned disclosures required for large listed companies. Tokyo Stock Exchange encourages ESG integration in governance. B. Singapore. SGX requires climate disclosures for listed companies in high-risk industries. Sustainability Reporting Guide supports ESG adoption. C. China. CSRC, China Securities Regulatory Commission, is piloting ESG reporting. Green bond standards and ESG fund guidance are emerging. 7. International standards. A. IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards, ISSB. IFRS S1, General Sustainability-Related Financial Disclosures. IFRS S2, Climate-Related Disclosures. Adopted or supported by UK, Canada, Australia, Nigeria, Singapore, and more. B. Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. Global baseline framework used by regulators, stock exchanges, and voluntary reporters. C. TNFD, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. New guidance emerging for biodiversity and ecosystem risk reporting. Challenges in global ESG regulation. Fragmentation, different frameworks, timelines, and definitions across regions. Data readiness. Many companies lack the systems and controls for robust ESG data collection. SME burden. Smaller firms face higher relative costs for compliance. Enforcement and assurance. Verification and regulatory capacity still developing in many regions. Emerging trends. Preparing for regulatory compliance. Companies should map regulatory obligations across jurisdictions where they operate. Conduct ESG materiality assessments. Implement data governance and controls. Engage legal and assurance providers for compliance and audit readiness. Integrate ESG into corporate strategy and board oversight. In summary, ESG reporting is rapidly becoming a regulatory obligation, not just a best practice. The EU is leading the charge with CSRD and taxonomy frameworks. The US, UK, and APAC nations are advancing their own climate disclosure rules. Global harmonization is slowly emerging via ISSB and TCFD. Companies must act early to ensure compliance, credibility, and competitiveness. Part 9. Integrating ESG into strategy. Introduction. Integrating environmental, social, and governance (ESG) factors into business strategy is no longer optional. It's critical for securing long-term success, risk management, and stakeholder trust. Today, companies must align their operations, policies, and growth objectives with ESG principles to stay competitive and mitigate risks in an evolving global marketplace. This part delves into how businesses can embed ESG considerations into their core strategic decision-making, operational practices, and overall corporate culture. Why integrating ESG into strategy matters. Long-term value creation. ESG factors help identify and manage risks that can affect long-term value, including environmental degradation, social inequality, and poor governance practices. Investor expectations. Increasingly, investors are demanding businesses adopt ESG-aligned strategies to ensure sustainability and resilience. Regulatory compliance. With growing regulations, embedding ESG into strategy is crucial for compliance with local and international requirements. Brand reputation. Customers and other stakeholders are more likely to support companies that demonstrate ethical practices and a commitment to sustainability. Operational efficiency. ESG-focused strategies can lead to cost savings, operational improvements, and innovation through efficiency gains, e.g., energy savings, waste reduction. Key steps to integrating ESG into business strategy. 1. Establish clear ESG objectives. Before integrating ESG into the broader strategy, companies need to define what they aim to achieve through their ESG efforts. These objectives should be specific, measurable, and aligned with both the company's mission and stakeholder expectations. Examples of ESG objectives. Achieving net zero emissions by 2030. Increasing diversity at the leadership level by 20% in 5 years. Achieving zero waste to landfill by 2025. Ensuring full supply chain transparency regarding human rights by 2024. Clear objectives ensure that ESG considerations are not just an add-on, but part of the strategic framework. 2. Conduct an ESG materiality assessment. A materiality assessment helps identify and prioritize the most relevant ESG factors to the business and its stakeholders. This step ensures that resources are allocated efficiently and that the company is focusing on the most impactful areas. Steps for a materiality assessment. Identify stakeholders, employees, customers, investors, regulators, communities, etc. Collect data. Use surveys, interviews, and industry research to identify key ESG topics. Prioritize issues. Rank ESG factors by their potential financial impact, reputational risk, and relevance to stakeholders. Map ESG issues to business goals. Align material ESG issues with business objectives and growth strategies. By focusing on material ESG issues, companies can avoid the risk of being overwhelmed by less significant topics. 3. Embed ESG in corporate governance and leadership. Integrating ESG into strategy requires strong governance to ensure that the necessary actions are taken at the right levels of the organization. Governance integration. Board-level oversight. Assign board members to oversee ESG strategy and ensure that ESG goals are incorporated into the company's overall risk management framework. Leadership commitment. Senior management must champion the ESG strategy and be accountable for progress. This often involves designating an ESG officer or Chief Sustainability Officer, CSO. Cross-department collaboration. ESG initiatives should be integrated across various functions, from finance and marketing to supply chain and human resources. A robust governance structure ensures that ESG initiatives are prioritized, properly resourced, and aligned with business objectives. 4. Incorporate ESG into risk management. ESG risks, such as climate change, labor violations, and data breaches, can significantly affect a company's operations and reputation. Integrating ESG considerations into the company's risk management framework allows for the proactive identification, assessment, and mitigation of these risks. Risk management steps. Identify ESG risks. Using the materiality assessment and industry analysis, identify environmental, social, and governance risks. Assess impact and likelihood. Quantify how each ESG risk could impact business operations and evaluate its probability. Integrate ESG into enterprise risk management, ERM. Include ESG risks in the company's ERM system and track them alongside traditional financial risks. Develop mitigation strategies. Establish clear action plans to mitigate high-priority ESG risks. By embedding ESG risks into the risk management process, companies can better prepare for potential disruptions. 5. Align ESG with financial performance and KPIs. To truly integrate ESG into business strategy, it's essential to align it with financial performance and operational KPIs. This allows companies to demonstrate the value of ESG initiatives in terms of profitability, efficiency, and competitive advantage. Financial integration. ESG-linked executive compensation. Link a portion of executive pay to ESG performance, e.g., reduction in carbon emissions, progress on diversity targets. Incorporate ESG metrics in financial reporting. ESG factors should be reflected in the company's financial performance, such as cost savings from energy efficiency or the revenue impact of sustainable products. Long-term financial goals. Set long-term ESG targets, e.g., carbon neutrality by 2040, that align with corporate growth and profitability objectives. Aligning ESG with financial performance makes it easier to justify investments in sustainability and gain buy-in from shareholders and management. 6. Drive innovation and sustainability across the value chain. A key aspect of embedding ESG into strategy is focusing on innovation and sustainability across the company's value chain, from sourcing materials to product design, manufacturing, and distribution. Innovation examples. Product design. Develop sustainable products with lower environmental impact. Sustainable sourcing. Source materials that are ethically produced and have minimal environmental impact, e.g., responsibly harvested timber or fair trade certified products. Green supply chains. Invest in technologies and practices that reduce waste, emissions, and energy use throughout the supply chain. By fostering sustainability within the value chain, companies not only reduce their environmental impact, but also create opportunities for new revenue streams and market differentiation. 7. Communicate ESG progress and results. Transparent communication of ESG goals and progress is essential for maintaining stakeholder trust and ensuring continued support for ESG initiatives. Effective ESG communication. Annual sustainability reports. Publish reports that track ESG progress and demonstrate alignment with company strategy. Ensure alignment with recognized frameworks, e.g. GRI, TCFD, SASB. Investor communications. Provide clear ESG disclosures in financial filings and investor presentations. Engagement with stakeholders. Regularly engage with employees, customers, investors, and communities to update them on ESG efforts. Transparent communication allows companies to build credibility and strengthen their reputation as responsible corporate citizens. Challenges in integrating ESG into strategy. Lack of ESG expertise. Many companies still lack the in-house expertise required to embed ESG effectively into strategy. Data availability and quality. Collecting high-quality ESG data for reporting and analysis can be resource-intensive and difficult. Balancing short-term and long-term goals. Integrating ESG may conflict with short-term financial pressures, especially in industries with significant environmental or social impacts. Resistance to change. Employees and stakeholders may resist changes to business models and corporate culture. Case study: Patagonia's commitment to ESG. Patagonia provides a compelling example of how a company can embed ESG into its core strategy. Environmental leadership. Committed to 100% recycled materials and sustainability-focused innovation in products. Social responsibility. Focuses on fair labor practices and supports environmental advocacy through grants and partnerships. Governance. Incorporates ESG into decision-making at every level, from supply chain to board oversight. Patagonia's commitment to ESG is core to its brand identity, contributing to strong customer loyalty, market differentiation, and operational resilience. In summary, integrating ESG into strategy is essential for long-term business success and risk management. The process involves setting clear objectives, conducting materiality assessments, embedding governance, and aligning with financial goals. Challenges include data quality, expertise, and balancing short-term pressures with long-term sustainability. Transparent communication and stakeholder engagement are key to ensuring credibility and achieving ESG goals. Part 10. Future Trends in ESG. Introduction. The ESG landscape is evolving rapidly, and businesses must be agile in adapting to new trends, technologies, and societal expectations. As ESG becomes a central component of corporate strategy, investors, regulators, and consumers are driving innovative changes that influence how businesses approach sustainability and ethical practices. This part explores emerging trends in the ESG space, highlighting technological advancements, regulatory developments, and shifts in stakeholder behavior that will shape the future of ESG. 1. The rise of technology in ESG reporting and performance. As companies face increasing pressure to report and improve their ESG performance, technology is becoming a key enabler in the tracking, measurement, and reporting of ESG data. A. Artificial intelligence, AI, and data analytics. AI and machine learning can analyze large datasets to predict and assess ESG risks and opportunities. Advanced analytics help businesses identify patterns in environmental impacts, social factors, and governance structures, allowing for more proactive decision-making. Example: AI-powered tools can track emissions across a supply chain in real time, automatically calculating carbon footprints and identifying areas for improvement. B. Blockchain for transparency and traceability. Blockchain technology is becoming increasingly important for enhancing supply chain transparency, ensuring that materials are ethically sourced and that environmental claims are verifiable. Blockchain ensures that sustainability claims, e.g. carbon offsets, ethical sourcing, are auditable and transparent. Smart contracts can automatically enforce ESG-related commitments, such as ensuring suppliers meet sustainability criteria. Example: IBM's Food Trust blockchain allows for the traceability of food products from farm to table, ensuring that sustainability and ethical practices are followed. 2. ESG and financial innovation. The rise of green and sustainable finance. Sustainable finance is one of the fastest-growing areas in global finance. Green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and ESG-focused investment funds are just the beginning of a broader shift in how capital is allocated to companies with strong ESG practices. A. Green bonds and ESG bonds. Green bonds are debt instruments used to raise capital for projects that have positive environmental or social impacts. The growth of green bonds is being driven by a rise in climate-conscious investors and the increasing focus on the Paris Agreement and net zero commitments. Investors seek fixed-income products that align with their ethical investing goals, and companies are increasingly issuing ESG bonds to fund sustainability projects. Example: a company might issue a green bond to fund renewable energy projects, and investors will be attracted by the bond's environmental benefits and the company's commitment to sustainability. B. Sustainability-linked loans and financing. Sustainability-linked loans, SLLs, tie the interest rate on loans to a company's ESG performance. If the company meets predefined sustainability targets, e.g., reducing carbon emissions or improving social governance, the interest rate on the loan is reduced. This approach incentivizes companies to improve their ESG practices while allowing them to lower financing costs. Example: a company might take out a loan to fund a renewable energy project, with the interest rate lowering if it achieves its carbon neutrality targets by a certain date. 3. Increased regulatory and legal pressure on ESG practices. Governments and regulators around the world are intensifying their focus on ESG disclosures and corporate accountability, driving a future where ESG considerations are legally required and closely monitored. A. Mandatory ESG disclosure regulations. We have already seen significant strides in mandatory ESG disclosures in the EU, US, and other regions, and this trend will continue to grow. The EU's CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and the SEC's proposed climate disclosure rules in the US are just the beginning. The ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board, created by the IFRS Foundation, is expected to drive global consistency in ESG reporting and disclosure standards, enabling a more harmonized global regulatory landscape. As ESG reporting requirements become more standardized, companies will need to ensure they can meet these stringent obligations or risk penalties and reputational damage. B. Climate litigation and accountability. As climate change impacts intensify, companies are increasingly facing lawsuits related to environmental and social harm. Shareholders, consumers, and affected communities are pursuing legal action against companies that fail to meet ESG-related commitments or contribute to climate change. We can expect litigation risks to rise as climate change and environmental degradation are no longer seen as distant risks but current realities. Example: oil companies and high-polluting industries may face lawsuits for contributing to climate change and failing to reduce emissions in line with international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord. 4. Social issues and human capital management as a priority. Social factors are becoming a critical part of the ESG landscape, especially in light of growing awareness of human rights, labor practices, and diversity. As businesses adopt socially responsible practices, they are discovering that social issues can significantly impact performance. A. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Investors and consumers are increasingly holding companies accountable for their efforts in fostering a diverse and inclusive workplace. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, are expected to play a much larger role in corporate strategy going forward. Companies will need to meet measurable diversity goals, improve gender equity, and ensure that their workplaces are inclusive and free of discrimination. Example: Companies are now setting DEI targets for board representation and employee diversity across various demographics, such as gender, race, and ability. B. Employee well-being and mental health. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need for employee well-being, including mental health support. As businesses recognize the importance of mental health in the workplace, they will need to integrate well-being programs and promote work-life balance to maintain a productive, engaged workforce. Companies that prioritize mental health and employee wellness are more likely to attract and retain top talent. Example: tech companies like Microsoft and Google are already offering mental health support programs, flexible working arrangements, and wellness resources to employees. 5. The future of climate risk and adaptation. As the physical risks of climate change become more apparent, businesses must adopt adaptation strategies alongside their mitigation efforts. Adaptation includes strategies for resilience and preparedness for climate impacts. A. Climate risk and scenario analysis. Regulatory bodies, like the TCFD, are pushing companies to assess and disclose climate risks through scenario analysis. These analyses examine how different climate scenarios, e.g., a 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise, will impact a company's operations, supply chain, and long-term viability. Climate risk disclosures will become more sophisticated, helping companies anticipate and plan for both transition and physical risks associated with climate change. B. Nature-based solutions and biodiversity. As the biodiversity crisis becomes more urgent, nature-based solutions, NBS, will be a focus for many businesses. Companies are investing in protecting natural ecosystems and promoting biodiversity to mitigate environmental risks and enhance corporate reputations. Example: companies may invest in reforestation or wetland restoration projects as part of their environmental strategy to both offset carbon emissions and enhance natural biodiversity. 6. Collaboration and stakeholder engagement. The future of ESG is not just about internal policies, but about collaborating with external stakeholders, from governments and investors to local communities and non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Companies that engage with stakeholders will be better positioned to align with evolving expectations and build trust in their ESG efforts. Cross-sector partnerships will enable companies to solve complex issues like climate change and supply chain sustainability while enhancing their social license to operate. In summary, the future of ESG is heavily influenced by technology such as AI, blockchain, and data analytics, which help companies track and manage their ESG impacts. Sustainable finance will continue to grow, with green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, and ESG-focused investments becoming more mainstream. Regulatory requirements for ESG disclosures will increase, with mandatory reporting and legal accountability rising globally. Social issues such as DEI, mental health, and human rights will take center stage in the ESG conversation. Climate risk and adaptation will remain a key focus, with businesses adopting resilient strategies and preparing for future climate impacts. Collaboration with stakeholders and engagement with communities will be central to ESG success. The future of ESG is dynamic, complex, and deeply interconnected with both societal needs and business operations. Companies that adapt to these trends will position themselves for long-term sustainability and growth.